Recently, I was gifted a retro handheld game Linux system by Anbernic. It's the 64 gigabyte model. So if you go to Anbernic's website, they have different models you can get. You can see over here. And so here's the different models. Most of them comes with the 16 gigabyte firmware. And then it comes with a second card with all the games on it. So if you end up getting the 64 gigabyte plus 64, there'll be 64 gigabytes worth of games versus the 256, which will have 256 gigabytes worth of games on a second flash drive. So let me show you. Here's the system with the 4,000 games. And I'll show you the model that I have, 353vs. So in this first video, I'm going to talk about the very first thing you might want to do, which is, let's turn this off, is to create a copy of a firmware file onto a different flash drive. So on the top is TF1. And then the bottom is TF2. TF2 is for your games, and TF1 is for the firmware, which is 16 gigabytes. You could just get only the 16 gigabyte model, and then buy your own 64 or 256, or you can use whatever size, and then copy your own, if you have your own ROMs onto there for yourself. But it's just nice to buy the 64 gigabyte one with their games on it. So we don't need to make a copy of this. The first thing they suggest doing is making a copy of the firmware, which is just a 16 gigabyte drive, flash drive over here. So today I'm going to talk about two ways you can do it. One way is to make a copy of this drive and then copy it onto another flash drive. You'll probably be asking, well, can I put it onto a 32 gigabyte? Can I put it on 64 gigabyte? You definitely can put it on a larger size memory card. Probably not smaller, but something bigger. What is the negative of doing that? Well, if you put it on a bigger flash drive, you might not be able to use the extra space because the games partition on the 16 gigabyte firmware file, if you make a direct copy, will have the size of that partition probably be small. You might be able to resize it. That's the tricky part. I had problems resizing it. But anyways, the tool that you can use, which I've used, is Rufus. You can also download the firmware from their website, which I'll go over, and hopefully that'll be of help for some people. So the first method I'll talk about is using Rufus to make a copy of what's on the firmware disk. So let's go do that. You'll need a card reader, which I have over here, a USB card reader. So hopefully you have something like that. So I'm going to take this and plug this into my computer. It'll detect the drive. From here, I went on to Rufus's website and downloaded the tool Rufus that I'll use to make a copy of it. So here's the Rufus file. It's the portable version. No. I'm actually going with the method that I don't prefer doing. So it has the device. It recognizes the 16 gigabyte device. Under Show Advanced Properties, click on that. And now you can, go about and clicking the save icon over here, which will make a backup of a backup image file, like a VHD file. It says over here, compressed VHDX files. So I'll show it again in case you missed it. After you load Rufus, By default, this option, show advanced drive properties, will be hidden. Click on it with the mouse, and once you click on it, you'll have the save icon enabled. Click on the save icon, and now I'm going to save it to desktop, and I'm going to call it Anbernic firmware. See over there? And it's saving to the desktop, and I'm going to click on save. It's going to take a while to do, probably about 10-15 minutes. So I'll let that finish. I'll come back once it's done. So this part is the part where we create a image of the original firmware SD card. Image file is almost done being created. Once it's done, it'll be on desktop. I saved it as this over here on the left side. It's a pretty big file. Remember, it's coming from a 16 gigabyte card, so it's a 13.5 gigabyte backup file. VHD something. Sorry, I'm horrible with names. Now that it's done, I can go ahead and eject my SD card reader and put in the new SD card. So I pull this out. This was the original one. And what I'm going to do is, I don't know why it's so dark. There you go. Had autofocus lock. So I'm going to take the original 16 gigabyte, which is this Kioxia, put it down, put in a 32 gigabyte card, and go ahead and pop this and burn it. Put it in. It might not detect the drive in Rufus automatically. It actually did. At this point, now that it's loaded, again, what I've done in the past is I closed Rufus, then reopened Rufus just to make sure it was detecting the right drive. But this is the 32 gigabyte drive. Originally, I had the 16 gigabyte drive that I backed up. And now I'm just going to select the image over here. Again, it's super easy. Just click select. I'm in desktop, and I create Anbernic firmware file. You can see VHDX file. And all I do is click start. And I'm going to click yes. Click OK. Okay. So I'm not sure how long this will take. It takes a while because it's writing to a old SD card. It took about 10-15 minutes to do the backup, and now to actually write the backup to another flash drive. It's going to take a while, so I'll show it's 11:09 right now. I'll come back when it's almost done. As it's doing its thing right now, I want to reiterate that after it's done, the games partition might be pretty small, and you might need to expand it. In this case, it's going from 16 to 32 gigabytes, so you could make the games partition an extra 16 gigabytes in space. There's some documentation that mentions to use DiskGenius to resize the partition. I tried actually doing this, and I didn't have success in doing it. After I had resized the gaming partition, the flash drive stopped working. So I can't really speak about that part. I just know it's mentioned in the documentation written by Anbernic. They have some documentation about it in a different firmware download file. It's mentioned over here in 35xxx, but that's a different story. Let's see how far we are with this. It's only 10%. Again, only a few minutes have passed. It's taking over 20 minutes to do the write to micro SD card. There's a second method, which is a little quicker, is to download the firmware file. In my case, I have a 353vs, RG353vs, and the firmware file, if you Google it, it's under this directory. Takes you to the firmware download page. Even though this looks like the 353vs and it says 35xx, you want to scroll down all the way to the correct version you need. In my case, mine is just RG353v, excluding the S, and I can get the firmware file from over here. I'm not sure what Android is for, but I know this is the one that was originally installed into the one that I had. So it's almost done. 10 more seconds. And I'll be able to eject the drive and try it out with the handheld over here. The reason why the second method is preferred is it's a little easier getting the gaming partition to be resized automatically. So now it's finished. If I can show you, on Windows 11 it didn't show the gaming partition, but let me see if I can find it if I go into Properties Manage. I right-clicked on this PC and I click Manage. From here, click on Disk Management. It'll take a while. So right now, the gaming partition doesn't have a drive associated with it, so I can right-click on there and change drive letter path to, I can add it, but I'm not going to do it now. What I want to say is, you can see it's only 5.29 gigabytes. This needs to be resized if I want to use all of the 32 gigabytes of this flash drive. And that's where Disk Genius comes into play. So this isn't going to be part of my tutorial. Well, this isn't even a tutorial. I just want to make a video about this because that was the first thing I wanted to do. So here it is. It's ready. I'm going to eject the drive and put it into here. Ejecting the drive. Almost lost the SD card. Remember, it goes up, kind of upside down when you pop it into the TF1 slot. If you don't make a good copy of the firmware, it won't power on at all. But the firmware looks good. And it's loading. There you go. There's a few games installed already on it. But anyways, it's working. That's the first method I showed, using Rufus to create a backup and then copy the backup image onto another SD card of any size that's 16 gigabytes or larger. Second method will be using the firmware file found on the download page. And so I'll try to include it with this video if possible, maybe not. This is my handheld gaming device. It's made by Anbernic. It's a model RG353vs. And today I'll be talking about a method of recreating the software firmware onto an SD card. A lot of people have said that the SD card that comes with this doesn't seem too reliable, so one of the first things you can do when you get it is to make your own firmware disk, flash drive. So in this method, you will be using the software that they provide on their website. All you need is a SD card big enough, at least 16 gigabytes or larger. What I've tried is I've used a 32 as well as a 64 gigabyte, and the nice thing is it resizes the gaming partition when you first boot it onto your handheld game device. So this is, for me, the preferred method versus copying the original firmware USB flash drive and then cloning it. This way, at least you can use supposedly the full space on the flash drive. So I'm going to go to the website right now and show you where you can find the firmware for this model 353vs. If you Google 353vs download software, one of the first search results is firmware download, and that's where you want to go. So this is the URL you want. I'll put in the description. So for my model, handheld, I was actually going to the wrong link, which was this one, because it looks just like the one I have. The one I really want to go to is the 353V. So as a reminder, don't go to the 35XX. You want to, for the 353vs, you want to go to RG353V. And then from here, click download. And then you have two options, the Linux or the Android. I use the Linux one. This button doesn't work, but you can copy this link. And then paste it. And it takes you to the firmware file. You'll have to still uncompress the GZ file to get the image file. So I'll kind of do it here just to show you. I'm going to go download it. How do I get it to download? I love this. So click on this button and then you can click download. It's going to download. Eventually, it's doing its thing. It's zipping the file, actually. Once it's finished downloading, you can use a tool like Rufus over here to burn the image onto the micro SD card. It's as simple as that. And as I mentioned before, once you finish burning it, once you insert the flash drive into the TF1 slot over here, the top one, and you run it the first time, I think it resizes the gaming partition, so you'll be able to use the full size of the gaming partition. One thing to note is I don't believe if you have both cards, the TF2 and the TF1 card in place, the firmware as well as the gaming SD card plugged into your gaming system, I think by default it will try to read from the gaming drive. and so it might not use the games that are located that you finally decide to copy onto the firmware SD card. I could be wrong, but that's what my past experience has been. It finished downloading. I'm going to copy this file to desktop. Here it is on the desktop. Again, it's a compressed file, so you have to uncompress it. You may need something like 7-zip or WinRAR to unzip it, but I think Windows 11 allows you to do it, extract all. And I'm going to just extract it to desktop like this. And there, it's extracted the file. It's an image file. This is what we want. And you can use that to burn. You can open Rufus and burn it onto an SD card. So I downloaded the file, unzipped it. It's ready to go. I'm going to go open up my flash drive. I'm going to put it in to my computer and open Rufus. This is a lot quicker than it's already running. Oops. Here it is. And there's my 32 gigabyte drive. Make sure you're pointing to the right SD card. And so originally, before this, I had used firmware backup, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use instead the firmware that I unzipped, which was this file over here, onto desktop. So I'm going to select need to go into this folder and get the image file. It's only 4 gigabytes. Click open. And then from here, it's just a matter of me clicking start. And it's writing the image. When I tried the VHD backup method, where I copied the original SD card, the writing part took 20 minutes, whereas 20 minutes or more. This method where I used Anbernic's firmware file over here, it will only take me less than 7 minutes to do, so this is ideal. The other advantage of doing this is, what do you call it? The gaming partition that's on here. It should resize when you first install it into the gaming device over here. When you first install it, you'll see a screen that says it's initializing, and I think what it does is it resizes the gaming partition so you can use it. I'll make one additional comment, and it's that when you have TF1 SD card and TF2 SD card, it reads games from the TF2 SD card, but on the TF1, I'm not sure if it reads it. And so when I was trying to use this, I actually removed the TF2 card so I could play games on the TF1 card. I'm not sure if there's a better way of doing that. There probably is, but I just want to mention that. So we'll come back in 5 minutes and try this out. So it just finished. And so what I'll do now is I will pop in the flash drive. I used a 32 gigabyte drive just to show that after it initializes the first time, it'll resize the gaming partition so that it's larger than the default 3 gigabytes for the 16 gigabyte firmware file that was originally with it. So let me go do that. I'm going to eject the drive. Didn't do it the right way. Remember, it needs to go kind of upside down. New one's plugged in. I'm going to power it up, and you'll see when it first loads up, it's not powering up. If you have issues, you can try pressing the reset button over here once, and then pressing the power button. With my luck, it didn't work this time. Something's wrong with the firmware. When I try to power it, the power light doesn't come on at all. I'll have to try this again. In case you have issues booting it up, sometimes you can just press the power button. Totally missed that. You can see it's initialing the user data. So I think it's resizing the gaming partition. It's taking a while. This is a lot quicker on my Samsung drive. Should be bringing it up now. I want it to be English, so I need to press B. B over here. That's it. It's ready to go. That easy. So in my case, I had trouble booting up the drive. if you Google it, they mention press the erase button once, wait a few seconds, and then press the power button and hold it until it turns on. You can see that the games partition is larger than 3.5 gigabytes. Preferred method.